Lieutenant Hana Kim walked into the briefing room and felt every eye turn toward her. She was used to this by now. At 5 feet and 2 inches tall, she stood out in all the wrong ways among the Terran Defense Corps officers. But today was different. Today she was surrounded by aliens who made even her tallest human colleagues look small. The Valtech warriors dominated the room like living mountains. Their scaly green skin caught the harsh overhead lights, and their yellow eyes tracked her movement with predatory focus. General Thex, their commander, stood nearly 7 feet tall with shoulders broad enough to block doorways. His clawed hands rested on the table as he studied the holographic display of their target. Behind him, 3 more Valtech officers whispered to each other in their clicking language. Hana caught fragments of their conversation through her translator earpiece. They were talking about her. Words like tiny and fragile came through clearly. The Nexari delegation occupied the far side of the room. These crystalline beings looked like living gemstones, their translucent blue bodies humming with internal energy. Commander Zix spoke in musical tones that her translator rendered as precise, emotionless statements. The Nexari never showed surprise, but Hana could see them tilting their geometric heads as they observed her. "So this is the human tactical specialist we were promised," General Thex said. His voice rumbled like distant thunder. "I expected someone more impressive." Colonel Park, Hana's commanding officer, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. The older man had gray hair and worry lines that seemed to deepen whenever he looked at her. "Lieutenant Kim has excellent qualifications, General. She graduated top of her class and has 3 commendations for tactical innovation." Innovation. General Thex tasted the word like something unpleasant. Valtech warriors do not need innovation. We need strength, courage, the ability to face an enemy and crush them. His yellow eyes fixed on Hana. Can she do that? Major Lee cleared his throat. He was younger than Colonel Park, but carried himself like someone trying to prove his authority. Perhaps Lieutenant Kim would be better suited for support duties. Intelligence analysis, communication coordination, that sort of thing. Hana felt her jaw tighten but kept her expression neutral. She had heard these same suggestions dozens of times before. Every mission briefing, every training exercise. Every time she walked into a room full of soldiers who looked at her and saw weakness instead of potential. "The mission parameters require close combat expertise," Commander Zix stated in her musical voice. "Our intelligence indicates the Scorian pirates have fortified their asteroid base with multiple defensive layers. Standard assault protocols will be necessary." "Exactly," General Thex agreed. "This will be real fighting. Not the kind of theoretical exercises they teach in human academies." He gestured at the holographic display, which showed a massive asteroid honeycombed with tunnels and defensive positions. "The Scorians are dangerous opponents. They fight like cornered animals with nothing to lose." Captain Wu, the transport commander, studied the tactical readout. He was a practical man who preferred simple solutions to complex problems. "The asteroid's outer defenses look manageable. Standard breach protocol should work. Get the Valtech shock troops through the main entrance while the Nexari provide covering fire." "And where do the humans fit in this plan?" Hana asked. Her voice carried clearly across the room despite its quiet tone. General Thex looked at her as if he had forgotten she could speak. "Humans will handle logistics. Supply lines, communication relays, medical support. Important work, but safely behind the front lines. With respect, General, I train for combat operations, not supply management." The Valtech commander's laugh was like rocks grinding together. "Training is not the same as experience, little human. The Scorians have been raiding shipping lanes for 3 years. They have killed hundreds of warriors from dozens of species. This is not a place for someone who looks like a strong wind might blow her away." Sergeant Nam, one of Hana's communications specialists, started to speak up in her defense, but Hana caught her eye and shook her head slightly. She had learned long ago that having others fight her battles only made things worse. "I understand your concerns," Hana said carefully, "but my tactical analysis suggests there might be alternative approaches to consider." "Alternative approaches?" Commander Zix's crystalline features remained expressionless, but her internal glow flickered with what might have been curiosity. Hana moved closer to the holographic display and pointed at the asteroid's structure. The base was built inside a mining asteroid. These maintenance shafts and service tunnels were part of the original mining operation. Most assault plans focus on the main corridors and defensive choke points, but But those tunnels are too small for proper warriors, General Thex interrupted. Only maintenance drones and perhaps human children could fit through such spaces. That could be an advantage rather than a limitation. Major Lee frowned. Lieutenant Kim, I think what General Thex is trying to say is that we need to be realistic about our capabilities. This is a dangerous mission requiring experienced combat veterans. I am a combat veteran, Hana replied quietly. Training simulations are not real combat, General Thex said dismissively. I was referring to the Centauri station incident. That brought a moment of silence to the room. Everyone in the Defense Corps knew about Centauri Station, a terrorist attack that had nearly succeeded in destroying an entire spaceport. The official reports credited teamwork and quick thinking for stopping the attackers, but the classified details were known only to those who had been there. Colonel Park cleared his throat. Lieutenant Kim was part of the response team that neutralized the terrorist threat. Her actions were instrumental in preventing civilian casualties. How many terrorists were there? Commander Zix asked. 12, Hana answered. And how many response team members? I was alone when I encountered them. General Thex's eyes narrowed. You fought 12 armed terrorists by yourself? I avoided fighting them directly. I used the station's ventilation system to move unseen, disabled their communications, and picked them off one at a time. When station security arrived, there were only 3 terrorists left conscious. The Valtech commander studied her with new attention. Interesting. But space stations are different from combat zones. Terrorists are not the same as trained soldiers. No, they're not, Hana agreed. Terrorists are desperate and unpredictable. Soldiers follow patterns and procedures. Captain Wu leaned forward. Are you saying you could infiltrate the Scorian base? I'm saying the mission might benefit from multiple approaches. While the main assault draws attention to the primary defenses, a smaller team could use the maintenance systems to gather intelligence or create diversions. A smaller team? Major Lee asked. Or a single operative? General Thex shook his massive head. Too risky. We cannot afford to lose personnel on experimental tactics. The proven approach is direct assault with overwhelming force. And if the proven approach fails, it will not fail, the Valtech commander said with absolute certainty. Valtech warriors have never been defeated in direct combat. Commander Zix's musical voice cut through the growing tension. The mission timeline requires departure in 6 hours. Final assignments must be confirmed. Colonel Park looked uncomfortable as he consulted his tablet. Lieutenant Kim, you'll be assigned to the command post with communications oversight. You'll monitor the assault teams and coordinate with Fleet Command. Hana nodded without expression. Understood, sir. As the briefing broke up and the various species separated into their planning groups, she overheard more whispered conversations. The Valtech were confident this would be a simple operation. The Nexari calculated success probabilities in the high 80s. Even her fellow humans seemed relieved that she would be safely out of harm's way. Nobody noticed Lieutenant Hana Kim studying the asteroid schematics one more time before the holographic display powered down. Nobody saw her memorizing the maintenance shaft layouts that everyone else had dismissed as irrelevant. Sometimes being underestimated was the most useful weapon of all. The Joint Strike Fleet dropped out of hyperspace exactly on schedule. Lieutenant Hana Kim watched from the command ship's bridge as dozens of vessels materialized around the target asteroid. The Valtech battle cruisers looked like massive metal predators with their sharp angles and weapon pods. The Nexari ships resembled floating crystals that pulsed with inner light. The human vessels seemed small and practical next to their alien allies, but they carried the most advanced sensor arrays in the fleet. Target acquired, announced the navigation officer. Through the main viewport, the asteroid looked like a dark tumor against the starfield. It was huge, easily 10 kilometers across, with the irregular surface that marked it as a former mining operation. Scattered across its surface, defensive turrets caught the distant sunlight like metallic growths. General Thex stood at the tactical display, his massive frame radiating confidence. The plan is simple. Valtech assault ships will punch through their outer defenses and establish beachheads at the main entry points. Once we have secured landing zones, the ground troops will sweep through the base level by level. Commander Zix's crystalline form hummed softly as she processed targeting data. Nexari long-range vessels will provide orbital support. Our precision weapons can eliminate specific defensive positions without damaging the base structure. And human ships will maintain communication networks and provide medical support, added Colonel Park. He looked relieved that the plan kept most of his personnel out of direct combat. Hana studied her tactical screen from her position at the communications station. Something felt wrong about the intelligence reports. The asteroid's defensive layout seemed too obvious, too easy to read. Real pirates would not be so predictable. Beginning approach, Captain Wu announced from his transport ship. All assault teams report ready for deployment. The fleet began its attack run. The Valthek ships led the charge, their heavy armor gleaming as they accelerated toward the asteroid. Behind them, the more delicate Nexari vessels took up positions for long-range bombardment. The human ships spread out to maintain communication links and provide support functions. For a moment, everything went according to plan. The asteroid seemed to wait passively as the attack fleet closed distance. The defensive turrets remained silent. Even the most nervous officers began to relax. Then the trap was sprung. The space around the asteroid erupted with weapons fire. Hidden missile pods that had appeared to be debris launched volleys of guided rockets. Concealed energy weapons carved deadly paths through space. What had seemed like a simple mining asteroid revealed itself as a fortress that had been waiting for exactly this kind of attack. Evasive maneuvers. General Thex roared, but it was too late for several ships. Captain Wu's transport took a direct hit from a plasma cannon that had been disguised as mining equipment. The ship's hull cracked open like an egg, spilling atmosphere and debris into space. Emergency beacons activated as escape pods scattered from the dying vessel, but many crew members were already gone. Medical ships, move to assist survivors, Colonel Park ordered, his face pale as he watched the tactical display. The Valthek battlecruiser Warrior's Pride shuddered under concentrated fire from multiple directions. Its heavy armor held, but warning lights flashed across damage control boards. Hull breaches on decks 4 and 7, reported the ship's tactical officer. Engineering reports power fluctuations. General Thex's yellow eyes blazed with fury. Return fire. Show these pirates what happens when they challenge Valthek warriors. The fleet's weapons opened up on the asteroid's surface, but the Scorians had prepared for this too. Their defensive positions were protected by energy shields and armor plating. Many of the Coalition's shots simply disappeared into defensive barriers or bounced off reinforced surfaces. Their shields are military grade, Commander Zix observed with her usual calm. This is not pirate equipment. Someone has been supplying them with advanced defensive systems. More hidden weapons revealed themselves as the battle continued. The asteroid had been turned into a massive trap, with overlapping fields of fire that made approach vectors extremely dangerous. Every time the Coalition ships tried to close distance, concentrated fire forced them back. Nexari vessels increase firing rate, General Thex commanded. Concentrate on their main shield generators. The crystalline ships complied, their energy weapons striking like focused lightning. But the Scorians adapted quickly. Mobile shield generators moved to protect damaged positions while new weapons platforms rose from concealed positions to replace destroyed turrets. Hana watched the battle develop with growing concern. The Coalition was fighting exactly as their enemies expected them to fight. Standard military doctrine, predictable attack patterns, overwhelming force applied in obvious ways. But the Scorians were not fighting like typical pirates. They were using sophisticated tactics and coordinated defensive strategies. "Sir," she said to Colonel Park, "the enemy response patterns suggest they knew we were coming." "What do you mean?" "They have prepared specific counters for Valthek assault tactics and Nexari bombardment patterns. This is not an improvised defense. They have been planning for exactly this kind of attack." Before Colonel Park could respond, another wave of missiles launched from the asteroid. These were different from the first attack, designed specifically to target the human support vessels. Proximity warheads exploded near the communication ships, showering them with fragments that interfered with their sensor arrays. "Communication network degrading," reported the signals officer. "Multiple ships report system failures." The Valthek assault ships finally reached the asteroid's surface, but their landing was nothing like the easy deployment they had planned. Hidden ground positions opened fire the moment the first troops disembarked. Energy weapons and projectile cannons turned landing zones into killing fields. "First assault wave taking heavy casualties," came the report from the surface. "Enemy has prepared defensive positions at every major entry point." General Thex slammed his clawed fist against the tactical display. "How did they know where we would land?" "Standard military doctrine," Hana said quietly. Any competent defender would fortify the obvious entry points. The Valthek commander turned his yellow gaze on her. You think you could do better? I think we need to change our approach. The enemy is fighting a defensive battle on ground they have prepared for months or possibly years. Every advantage is theirs as long as we follow predictable patterns. What do you suggest? Hana studied the tactical display, noting the positions of destroyed weapons platforms and the locations where return fire had been heaviest. The main defensive positions are designed to stop large assault forces, but they might have weaknesses against smaller, more mobile infiltration teams. We do not have time for infiltration, General Thex growled. Our troops are pinned down and taking casualties. Commander Zix's musical voice carried across the bridge. Long-range bombardment is proving ineffective. Defensive shields are adapting to our weapon frequencies. Recommend withdrawal to reassess tactical situation. Withdrawal? General Thex looked as if someone had suggested surrender. Valthek warriors do not retreat from pirates. But the situation continued to deteriorate. More ships reported damage. The assault teams on the asteroid's surface were trapped in defensive positions, unable to advance against prepared enemies who knew every tunnel and corridor in the complex. Medical ships struggled to evacuate wounded while under constant fire from hidden positions. Sir, the communications officer called out, we are receiving distress signals from multiple surface teams. They are requesting immediate evacuation. Colonel Park looked at the tactical display with the expression of someone watching his worst fears come true. Casualty reports scrolled across his screen in red text. Ships that should have been safely conducting support operations were now fighting for their survival. How many? He asked quietly. 17 confirmed killed in action, 34 wounded, 12 missing in action. And those are just the preliminary numbers. General Thex studied the battlefield with new attention. For the first time since the attack began, doubt crept into his voice. Their intelligence was better than ours. They knew we were coming, knew how we would attack, knew where we would be most vulnerable. So what do we do now? Major Lee asked. The question hung in the air as weapons fire continued to light up the space around the asteroid. The coalition had expected an easy victory against disorganized pirates. Instead, they had stumbled into a carefully prepared trap that was systematically destroying their forces. Hana looked at the tactical display one more time, noting details that everyone else seemed to have missed. The maintenance shaft networks that had been dismissed as irrelevant during the briefing, the power distribution systems that fed the defensive shields, the communication relays that coordinated the Scorian response. Sometimes the best approach was not the obvious one. The command post shook as another explosion rocked the asteroid's surface. Lieutenant Hana Kim gripped her console as dust fell from the ceiling above her. What had started as a safe rear position was now under direct attack as Scorian forces pushed back against the coalition landing zones. Communication with Alpha Team lost, reported the signals officer. His voice stayed steady but sweat beaded on his forehead. Beta Team reports they are surrounded and running low on ammunition. Colonel Park stared at the tactical display with the look of a man watching his career end in disaster. Red icons marked destroyed or damaged units while yellow warnings indicated teams that had gone silent. The green icons representing healthy coalition forces seemed to shrink with each passing minute. Can we reach Sergeant Nam's position? He asked. Hana checked her communications array. Nam's team had been assigned to establish a forward relay station to maintain contact with the surface assault teams. Now their signals were weak and intermittent. Last transmission was 40 minutes ago. They reported taking fire from multiple directions. Current status? Unknown. The relay station is not responding to any communication attempts. Major Lee looked up from his own console. His face was pale and his hands trembled slightly as he processed casualty reports. We have to assume they are either captured or killed. The Scorians are not known for taking prisoners. Hana studied the base schematics on her screen. Nam's position was in what the intelligence reports had called a low-priority area, but the Scorians seemed to have forces everywhere. The communication relay was positioned near several maintenance access points that had been marked as too small for military use. Sir, I request permission to attempt contact with the forward team, she said. Colonel Park barely looked up from his damage reports. Use the standard emergency frequencies. If they can respond, they will. I mean direct contact. Physical reconnaissance, that got his attention. Absolutely not. Lieutenant, your orders are to remain at this position and coordinate communications. Sir, if Nam's team is still alive, they might need immediate assistance. Every minute we wait reduces their chances of survival. And every minute you spend outside this bunker reduces your chances of survival to 0, Major Lee added. The surface is a war zone. Trained combat specialists are getting killed out there. Hana pulled up a detailed map of the area around the communication relay. The maintenance tunnels formed a complex network that connected most of the major installations in this section of the base. They were narrow, designed for automated systems and small repair drones, but they provided cover from the main battle zones. The maintenance access system extends from our current position to within 50 meters of the relay station. If I used the service tunnels, I could reach them without exposing myself to direct fire. Colonel Park shook his head. Those tunnels were designed for machines, not people. You would get stuck or lost in the dark. I have studied the original mining station blueprints. The basic layout follows standard industrial patterns. I can navigate the system. Even if you could reach them, then what? You cannot carry wounded personnel through maintenance shafts. Hana had already considered that problem. The tunnels connect to several emergency exits that are closer to our lines. If the team is mobile, I could guide them to safety through routes the Scorians might not be monitoring. Another explosion shook the command post, this one close enough to make the lights flicker. Through the reinforced windows, they could see energy weapon fire lighting up the asteroid's artificial atmosphere. The Valthek assault teams were still fighting, but their advance had stalled completely. The situation is deteriorating, observed the tactical officer. General Thex is requesting additional support, but we have no reserves to send. Major Lee consulted his tablet. Estimated time until we need to consider evacuation? Based on current casualty rates and ammunition consumption, approximately 3 hours before our position becomes untenable. Hana checked her equipment. Her standard communications gear included a portable relay unit, medical supplies, and basic tools. Not much for a rescue mission, but enough to establish contact with survivors and assess their condition. Sir, Sergeant Nam's team includes 4 specialists. If they are alive and we abandon them, we lose not just the personnel but also their intelligence on Scorian defensive positions. That information could be vital for future operations. Colonel Park was quiet for a long moment, listening to the sounds of battle outside. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of command decisions that could save or cost lives. The risk is too high. I cannot authorize a solo rescue mission by an officer with no field experience in this type of combat environment. I have field experience. Centauri Station was different. That was a space station with standard human architecture and predictable terrorist tactics. This is an alien environment with professional military opponents. Hana looked at the tactical display one more time. Nam's last known position was marked with a flashing yellow icon that meant uncertain status. 4 people who might be alive, might be wounded, might be waiting for help that would never come. Understood, sir. I will continue monitoring communications from this position. But as the battle reports continued to worsen, and the sounds of fighting grew closer to their own position, Hana made a decision that would change everything. When the next explosion sent everyone diving for cover, and the lights went out for several seconds, she quietly gathered her gear. The maintenance access hatch was located in a storage room adjacent to the main command center. According to the schematics, it connected to a primary service tunnel that ran parallel to the main corridors. The tunnel was just over 1 meter high and wide enough for a person to crawl through if they were not too large. Hana activated her helmet light and squeezed into the narrow space. The tunnel stretched ahead of her like a mechanical cave, lined with cables and pipes that carried power and atmosphere throughout this section of the base. The air tasted of metal and recycled atmosphere, but it was breathable. Moving through the confined space required careful planning. Every few meters she had to pause and consult her portable map display to ensure she was following the correct route. The tunnel system was more complex than the simplified schematics had indicated, with multiple branches and junction points. The sounds of battle were muffled but still audible through the tunnel walls. Energy weapon discharge created a distinctive humming noise that penetrated the metal around her. Occasionally she heard the heavier impacts of explosive weapons or the grinding sound of machinery under stress. After 20 minutes of careful movement, she reached a junction point where several tunnels converged. According to her map, the path to the left should take her toward Nam's position while the right branch led to the main power distribution center. She was about to take the left tunnel when she heard something that made her freeze. Voices. speaking in the clicking, hissing language of the Scorians. They were close, probably in one of the main corridors just above her position. She could not understand their words, but their tone suggested they were coordinating some kind of operation. Hana switched off her helmet light and waited in complete darkness. The Scorian voices moved past her position and faded into the distance. Only then did she risk reactivating her light and continuing toward the communication relay. The tunnel began to slope downward as it approached the outer sections of the base. Here the original mining equipment was still visible, massive mechanical systems that had carved useful materials from the asteroid's interior. The Scorians had built their defensive positions around and through these existing structures. When she finally reached the area near Nam's position, Hana could hear weapon fire very close by. She found a ventilation grate that opened into a storage area and carefully peered through the metal slats. What she saw made her heart sink. The communication relay station was partially destroyed. Equipment lay scattered across the floor and scorch marks covered the walls. But there was no sign of bodies, which meant Nam's team might have escaped to another position, or they might have been captured. Hana activated her portable communication unit and tried the emergency frequency. "Nam, this is Kim. If you can hear this, respond on channel 7. For a moment there was only static. Then very faintly a voice came through the interference. "Kim, how did you get here?" "Long story. What is your status?" "3 wounded, 1 critical. We are pinned down in a maintenance bay about 100 meters north of the original relay position. Cannot move without exposing ourselves to enemy fire." Hana consulted her map. The maintenance bay was accessible through the tunnel system, but getting wounded personnel out would require a different approach. "Can you hold position for another 30 minutes? "Maybe, but Lee is losing blood fast and we are running out of medical supplies. Help is coming." As she ended the communication, Hana realized she had just committed herself to a rescue mission that her commanding officer had specifically forbidden, but sometimes orders had to be weighed against the lives of people who were counting on you. Sometimes being the right size for the job was more important than following the chain of command. Lieutenant Hana Kim found Sergeant Nam's team trapped in a maintenance bay that had become an improvised fortress. 3 wounded soldiers sat with their backs against broken machinery, while Nam himself kept watch at the single entrance. His weapon was trained on the corridor outside, but from his tense posture Hana could tell ammunition was running low. She approached through a service hatch that opened directly into the bay. "Sergeant, I am coming through the maintenance access. Do not shoot." Nam spun around as the hatch opened, his weapon ready until he recognized her voice. "Lieutenant Kim? How did you get here?" "Service tunnels." "What is your team's condition?" Nam gestured to his wounded soldiers. Corporal Lee was the worst off, with a deep burn across his left shoulder that had destroyed most of his uniform and required constant pressure to control bleeding. The other 2 had less serious injuries but were clearly in pain and unable to move quickly. "Lee needs immediate medical attention," Nam reported. "The others can walk but not fight effectively." Hana studied the layout of the maintenance bay. It was a dead end with only one main entrance, which explained why the team had taken shelter here. But it also meant they were trapped if Scorian forces found their position. "Can you move, Lee?" "Short distances, but he loses consciousness if we try to carry him very far." Through the entrance, they could hear Scorian voices in the main corridor. The enemy was conducting systematic searches of every room and alcove in this section of the base. It would only be a matter of time before they checked the maintenance bay. "We need to get out of here," Hana said. "I know a route through the service tunnels that can get us back to coalition lines." Nam looked at the narrow maintenance hatch she had emerged from. "Lee cannot fit through there, and the rest of us would have to crawl the entire distance. We would be completely helpless if we encountered enemy forces in the tunnels. The enemy forces are not small enough to follow us. The tunnels provide protection from their main weapon systems. But what if they have tunnel clearing charges or gas weapons?" Hana had not considered those possibilities. Standard military doctrine for clearing confined spaces included exactly those kinds of weapons. If the Scorians realized the coalition was using the maintenance system, they could make the tunnels unusable or deadly. Then we need a different approach. She consulted her portable map display, studying the area around their current position. The maintenance bay was connected to several major systems, including power distribution and atmosphere processing. More importantly, it was located near one of the communication hubs that coordinated defensive operations in this sector. Nam, does your team still have demolition charges? 2 standard charges and 1 shaped charge for breaching operations. What about electronic warfare equipment? Basic signal jammers and 1 virus injection kit. Hana made a decision that surprised even herself. I need you to get your team ready to move in 30 minutes. Use the service tunnels to reach emergency exit 7. That will put you within 200 meters of coalition lines. What about you? I am going to create a distraction. Nam stared at her as if she had suggested attacking the entire Skorian fleet single-handed. Lieutenant, you cannot take on enemy forces by yourself. Even if you had heavy weapons, there are too many of them. I am not planning to fight them directly, but I can disrupt their operations enough to give you a clear escape route. She pointed to the tactical display on her portable unit. The Skorian defensive coordination in this sector depends on 3 communication nodes. If those nodes go offline, their ability to respond to threats will be severely reduced. Those nodes are heavily defended. Their defenses are designed to stop assault teams, not infiltrators using maintenance systems. Nam looked uncertain. This sounds like a suicide mission. It sounds like the only way to get your wounded team to safety. Hana transferred her escape route data to Nam's unit and gave him the emergency frequency codes for coalition forces. Then she gathered the demolition charges and electronic warfare equipment from his team. Give me 15 minutes after I leave, then start moving. Use the tunnel system exactly as I showed you. Do not deviate from the route even if it seems longer or more difficult. Lieutenant, I should report this to Colonel Park. Tell him after you get back to base. Before Nam could object further, Hana disappeared back into the maintenance hatch. This time she was carrying enough explosives to damage serious military targets, along with the electronic tools needed to infiltrate enemy computer systems. The first communication node was located in what had been the asteroid's primary mining control center. The Skorians had converted it into a coordination hub for their defensive operations. According to her intelligence data, it was protected by automated defenses and at least 6 guards. Hana reached the area through a combination of service tunnels and ventilation shafts. The node itself was housed in a reinforced chamber that could only be accessed through heavily monitored corridors, but the power and data cables that fed the communication equipment had to travel through less protected areas. She found the main data conduit in a utility tunnel directly below the communication hub. The cable bundle was as thick as her arm and carried both power and information signals. She attached one of Nam's virus injection devices to the data lines and planted a timed explosive charge on the power cables. The virus would corrupt the communication protocols while the explosive would cut power to the entire system. The combination should disable the node for at least several hours. But as she was setting the timer, Hana heard movement in the tunnel behind her. Someone else was using the maintenance system. She switched off her helmet light and pressed herself against the tunnel wall. Heavy breathing and the sound of metal scraping against metal indicated that someone much larger than herself was trying to navigate the confined space. A Skorian soldier appeared in the light of his own torch. He was moving awkwardly, clearly not designed for tunnel warfare, but he was armed and determined. When he spotted Hana, his weapon started to swing toward her. Hana had no choice but to act. She activated the explosive charge immediately instead of waiting for the timer, then threw herself toward the soldier. The explosion behind her sent a shockwave through the tunnel system and knocked both of them against the walls. The Skorian was stunned by the blast, giving Hana just enough time to reach the emergency release for the tunnel section. The floor panel dropped away, sending the enemy soldier into a lower maintenance area where he would not be able to follow her quickly. But the explosion had done more than disable the communication node. Lights were going out throughout this section of the base as power systems failed. Emergency alarms started sounding as automated safety systems responded to the damage. Hana realized her small sabotage operation had triggered a cascade failure that was affecting much more than just one communication hub. The Skorian defensive coordination was breaking down as multiple systems went offline simultaneously. Through the tunnel walls, she could hear confused voices and the sound of troops moving without clear directions. The rigid defensive pattern that had been so effective against the coalition assault was falling apart as commanders lost contact with their units. She checked her chronometer. Nam's team should be starting their escape attempt right now. If the distraction worked, They would be able to reach coalition lines while the enemy was dealing with system failures and communication breakdowns. But Hana realized she was not finished yet. 2 more communication nodes were still operational, and the Scorians would adapt to the damage quickly unless she could create more disruption. Sometimes the best way to win was not to be stronger or better armed than your enemy. Sometimes you just had to be more flexible, more creative, and willing to use methods they would never expect. The maintenance tunnel suddenly felt less like a hiding place and more like a highway that only she knew how to use. Lieutenant Hana Kim crawled deeper into the asteroid's core through maintenance tunnels that seemed to stretch endlessly into darkness. Her helmet light revealed cables and pipes that grew thicker and more complex as she approached the central systems. The air tasted different here, heavy with the metallic smell of industrial machinery and the chemical tang of life support systems working at maximum capacity. 2 communication nodes down, 1 to go. But as she studied her portable map display, Hana realized she had discovered something much more important than communication hubs. The maintenance shafts in this area served systems that had nothing to do with mining operations. These were military installations, weapon systems, and something else that made her blood run cold. Ship assembly bays. Through a ventilation grate, she could see into a massive cavern that had been carved from the asteroid's interior. Dozens of attack ships sat in various stages of construction or modification. These were not the crude vessels she would expect from pirates. They were sleek, military-grade fighters equipped with advanced weapons and armor. Hana activated her helmet camera and began recording. The ships bore markings from multiple species, but they had been modified with consistent weapon systems and communication arrays. Someone had been organizing the Scorian pirates into a proper military force, but the ships were not the worst discovery. Along the walls of the assembly bay, she could see star charts and targeting data. The displays showed 3 human colony worlds with detailed information about their defensive capabilities, population centers, and strategic resources. This was not a pirate base. It was a staging ground for invasion. She moved closer to get better images of the targeting data. The colony worlds of New Shanghai, Terra Verde, and Haven's Rest were marked with attack vectors and bombardment coordinates. Population estimates showed over 2 million civilians across the 3 worlds, none of them prepared for military assault. The attack plans were sophisticated and thorough. The Scorians had studied human defensive doctrine and identified weaknesses in colonial protection systems. They knew exactly where to strike to cause maximum damage with minimum resistance. Hana transmitted the recorded data back toward coalition lines using her emergency beacon, but the signal was weak and intermittent. The asteroid's mass and the Scorian jamming systems would probably prevent the transmission from reaching friendly forces. She had to find a way to destroy this operation from the inside, moving through the maintenance systems. She reached the assembly bay's power distribution center. The entire facility depended on 3 massive generators that had been installed in what used to be the asteroid's primary mining shaft. If those generators went offline, the assembly operation would shut down and the attack ships would be trapped without power. But the generators were heavily protected. Through the access grates, she could see Scorian guards patrolling the area in regular patterns. Automated defense turrets covered every approach route that was large enough for conventional troops. The maintenance tunnels, however, led directly to the generator cooling systems. Hana checked her remaining equipment. She had 1 shaped charge left from Nam's demolition kit, plus the electronic warfare tools she had not used on the communication nodes. It was not much for destroying 3 industrial generators, but it might be enough if she targeted the right systems. The cooling system for the first generator was accessible through a tunnel that ran alongside the main power conduits. Hana squeezed through the narrow space and found herself next to pipes that carried coolant fluid under high pressure. If those pipes ruptured while the generator was running at full capacity, the resulting overheating would cause automatic shutdown to prevent catastrophic failure. She attached her shaped charge to the main coolant line and set a 15-minute timer. That would give her time to reach the other generators and create additional problems for the Scorian engineers. But as she was leaving the first generator area, Hana encountered something unexpected. A maintenance robot was performing routine system checks in the tunnel ahead of her. The machine was small enough to fit in the confined space, but it was equipped with sensors that would detect her presence. Instead of retreating, She activated the virus injection kit and connected it to the robot's control system. NAM's electronic warfare specialists had designed the virus to disrupt Scorian communication protocols. But the basic programming should work on any automated system using similar software architecture. The robot's behavior changed immediately. Instead of following its programmed maintenance routine, it began moving toward the second generator, while transmitting false status reports to the central control system. The virus was making it report successful completion of maintenance tasks that it had not actually performed. Hana followed the infected robot toward the second generator. Along the way, they encountered 2 more maintenance robots, and she was able to spread the virus to their systems as well. Soon she had a small network of compromised machines that were reporting false data to Scorian engineers. The second generator's cooling system was located in a larger maintenance area that allowed more room to work. Hana used her remaining electronic tools to reprogram the cooling control systems directly. Instead of maintaining proper operating temperatures, the system would now gradually increase coolant flow beyond safe parameters, while reporting normal operation to monitoring stations. When the first generator's coolant line ruptured, the explosion would provide cover for the second generator's more subtle sabotage. By the time Scorian engineers realized what was happening, both systems would be offline. But the third generator presented a different challenge. It was newer than the others and used different control systems that her virus tools could not penetrate. Worse, it was located in an area where the maintenance tunnels were too small even for her to navigate safely. Hana studied the generator's specifications through the access grates. This machine provided power not just for the assembly bay, but for the weapon systems that were defending the entire sector. If she could disable it, the coalition forces would have a much easier time advancing through this area. The generator's main weakness was its fuel supply system. Like all industrial machines of this type, it required constant feeding of processed fuel elements that were stored in tanks connected by automated delivery systems. If those fuel lines were contaminated with the wrong materials, the generator would shut down automatically to prevent damage. She found the fuel delivery system in a utility area that was just barely accessible through the maintenance network. The fuel lines were clearly marked and protected by multiple safety systems, but they had not been designed to resist sabotage from someone working inside the maintenance infrastructure. Hana used her remaining tools to introduce false programming into the fuel delivery computers. The system would now mix incompatible fuel types in proportions that would force automatic shutdown when the generator tried to process them. As she finished her work on the third generator, the first explosion echoed through the asteroid's interior structure. The coolant line rupture had triggered exactly the cascade failure she had hoped for. Emergency alarms sounded throughout the facility, as automated safety systems responded to the sudden loss of cooling capacity. Through the maintenance tunnel walls, she could hear Scorian voices shouting orders and status reports, but their communications were hampered by the virus-infected maintenance robots, which were now spreading false information throughout the computer network. Within minutes, the second generator began showing signs of thermal stress as its compromised cooling system pushed operating parameters beyond safe limits. The third generator lasted slightly longer, but when the contaminated fuel reached its combustion chambers, it shut down immediately. The massive assembly bay went dark as backup power systems struggled to maintain minimal lighting and life support. The sophisticated attack ships that had been nearly ready for deployment were now trapped without power for their systems or fuel for their engines. But Hana's sabotage had accomplished something even more important than disabling enemy ships. The targeting data and invasion plans she had recorded were now uploaded to her emergency beacon, and with the jamming systems offline, the transmission finally reached coalition forces. 3 human colony worlds would have advance warning of the planned attack. 2 million civilian lives had been saved by a single person crawling through maintenance tunnels with basic demolition equipment. As she began her journey back toward coalition lines through the dark tunnels, Hana reflected on how the mission had changed. What had started as a simple raid against pirates had become something much more significant. Sometimes the most important victories happened in places where no one was watching. Captain Park sat in the communication center of the Coalition command ship, staring at a data stream that made no sense. For the past 3 hours, his monitoring equipment had been receiving fragments of encrypted transmissions from somewhere deep inside the asteroid. The signals were weak and intermittent, but they carried the authentication codes of Lieutenant Hana Kim. That was impossible. According to his records, Lieutenant Kim was safely stationed at the rear command post, coordinating communications for the surface assault teams. She was not equipped for deep reconnaissance missions, and she certainly had not been authorized to penetrate enemy territory. But the data was undeniable. Her helmet camera was transmitting combat footage that showed impossible infiltration through maintenance systems, successful sabotage of enemy installations, and intelligence gathering in areas that even the Valthek shock troops had been unable to reach. "Sir," called the communications officer, "we are receiving another data burst from Lieutenant Kim's position." Captain Park activated the main display screen. The footage was grainy and broken by interference, but it clearly showed the interior of what appeared to be a massive weapons facility. Ship construction bays filled with military-grade attack vessels, star charts showing human colony worlds marked for invasion, targeting data that indicated planned assaults on civilian populations. "Is this authentic?" he asked. The technical specialist ran verification protocols on the incoming data. "Authentication codes are correct. Video metadata confirms the source is Lieutenant Kim's standard-issue helmet camera. Signal encryption matches our current operational parameters." Captain Park studied the tactical implications of what he was seeing. If this intelligence was accurate, the Skorian operation was far more dangerous than anyone had realized. This was not a simple pirate base that could be eliminated with conventional military force. This was the staging ground for a war against human space. "Can we confirm her current location?" "Signal triangulation suggests she is approximately 8 kilometers from any known coalition position in the deepest areas of the asteroid interior. That should be impossible given our current operational parameters." Another data burst arrived, this one showing footage of Lieutenant Kim sabotaging industrial generators while maintenance robots moved around her in the background. The robots appeared to be under her control, following programming that she had somehow modified to assist her mission. "How long has she been transmitting?" "First signal was received 4 hours and 20 minutes ago. Transmission frequency has increased over the past 2 hours as she moved closer to the asteroid's communication relays." Captain Park realized what this meant. While the coalition forces had been fighting a brutal ground war against prepared defensive positions, one human soldier had been conducting a solo campaign that was systematically dismantling the enemy operation from within. The latest footage showed targeting computers displaying detailed attack plans for 3 human colonies, population estimates, defensive capabilities, strategic resources, bombardment coordinates, everything needed for successful planetary invasion. "Sir, this intelligence changes everything," the tactical officer observed. "If the Skorians launch these planned attacks, we could lose over 2 million civilians. Have these transmissions reached Fleet Command?" "Partial data has been forwarded through standard channels, but the complete intelligence package is too large to transmit while maintaining operational security. Lieutenant Kim appears to be uploading everything to her emergency beacon for later retrieval." Captain Park made a decision that would affect the entire mission. Priority transmission to General Thex and Commander Zix. All assault operations are to be redirected to protect Lieutenant Kim's position and ensure her successful extraction. This intelligence is more valuable than any tactical objective we originally planned to achieve. But even as he gave the order, more footage was arriving that showed the true scope of what Lieutenant Kim had accomplished. Explosions rocked enemy facilities as sabotaged systems failed in cascade patterns. Maintenance robots spread computer viruses throughout Skorian networks while their operators remained unaware of the infiltration. The communications officer looked up from his console with amazement. "Sir, enemy chatter indicates they are experiencing massive system failures throughout the asteroid. Power grids are going offline, communication networks are degrading, and they are reporting sabotage in areas they thought were completely secure." "One person did all this?" "According to the footage, yes, sir." The display screen showed Lieutenant Kim moving through maintenance tunnels that were barely large enough for a human to navigate. Her helmet light revealed complex industrial systems that she somehow understood well enough to disable with basic demolition equipment. The technical knowledge required for such precise sabotage should have taken years of specialized training. How did she know where to place the charges for maximum effect? Captain Park wondered aloud. The technical specialist had been studying the same question. Her targeting appears to be based on detailed understanding of industrial system architecture. She identified critical failure points that would create cascade effects throughout interconnected networks. More footage arrived showing Lieutenant Kim reprogramming maintenance robots using electronic warfare tools. The robots then moved through areas she could not reach physically, spreading her sabotage to systems throughout the facility. "Sir," the communications officer announced, "General Thex is requesting immediate briefing on this intelligence. He wants to know how one human soldier accomplished what his entire assault force could not achieve." Captain Park understood the general's confusion. The Valthek military doctrine was based on overwhelming force applied through direct confrontation. The idea that a single infiltrator could be more effective than an army of warriors challenged their fundamental understanding of warfare. "Patch me through to General Thex, the Valthek." Commander's image appeared on the main screen. His yellow eyes blazed with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "Captain Park, explain to me how your communications officer is conducting military operations without authorization." "Sir, Lieutenant Kim appears to have taken independent action when she discovered that coalition forces were facing a larger threat than intelligence had indicated." "Independent action?" "She disobeyed direct orders and abandoned her assigned position." "Yes, sir, and in doing so, she discovered that the Scorians are planning coordinated attacks on 3 human colony worlds. Her intelligence gathering has potentially saved millions of civilian lives." General Thex studied the tactical data that Captain Park transmitted. The invasion plans were comprehensive and detailed, showing months of preparation for military action against targets the coalition had never suspected were threatened. "This changes our operational priorities," the general admitted, "but I still do not understand how one small human accomplished what my warriors could not." Captain Park looked at the latest footage from Lieutenant Kim's position. She was now moving through areas of the asteroid that appeared completely abandoned, having successfully disabled the systems that supported enemy operations in that sector. "Sir, I believe the answer is that she used methods our enemies were not prepared to defend against. While they focused on stopping large assault forces, she found ways to attack their infrastructure, using routes and techniques they never considered possible." "You are saying she succeeded because she was underestimated?" "I am saying she succeeded because she thought differently about the problem. Instead of trying to overpower the enemy, she found ways to turn their own systems against them." The footage continued to arrive, each transmission showing more evidence of systematic sabotage that had crippled enemy operations throughout the asteroid. Power failures, communication breakdowns, transportation systems offline, weapons platforms inoperative. Commander Zix's musical voice came through the communication system. "Fascinating. One individual has achieved strategic objectives that conventional military force could not accomplish. This suggests human tactical thinking operates on principles we have not fully understood." General Thex was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications of what he was seeing. When he spoke again, his voice carried a note of respect that had not been there before. "Captain Park, your Lieutenant Kim has taught us something important about human capabilities. We may need to reconsider our assumptions about warfare and the value of unconventional approaches." The footage kept coming, documenting impossible achievements by someone who was supposed to be safely behind the lines, coordinating communications. Lieutenant Hana Kim emerged from the maintenance tunnel system 12 hours after she had disappeared into the asteroid's depths. Her uniform was torn and stained with coolant fluid and metal dust. Her helmet camera had recorded everything, but she had no idea that her footage was already changing how every species in the galaxy thought about human capabilities. The Coalition command post looked different when she returned. Instead of the desperate atmosphere of a failing mission, there was organized activity focused on consolidating victory. Scorian resistance had collapsed throughout. Most of the asteroid as their command systems failed and their defensive coordination broke. Down Colonel Park was waiting for her with an expression she had never seen before. It was not anger about her disobedience of direct orders. It was not relief that she had survived. It was something that looked like awe. "Lieutenant Kim, report your status." "Mission accomplished, sir. Sergeant Nam's team has been successfully extracted. Enemy communication and power systems have been neutralized. Critical intelligence regarding planned attacks on human colonies has been gathered and transmitted." "Sit down." "Lieutenant?" She took a chair across from his desk, noting that several other officers were present, including Major Lee and Captain Wu's replacement. They were all looking at her with the same strange expression. "Lieutenant, are you aware that your helmet camera has been transmitting for the past 12 hours? Hana checked her equipment status display. The emergency beacon showed active transmission mode, which meant her footage had been reaching coalition forces. "I was not aware of continuous transmission, sir. I thought the signal was too weak to penetrate enemy jamming." "The signal was weak, but it was getting through. We have 12 hours of combat footage showing everything you accomplished inside the asteroid." Colonel Park activated the main display screen. Hana watched herself moving through maintenance tunnels, sabotaging enemy installations, reprogramming maintenance robots, and gathering intelligence in areas that should have been impossible to reach. "Sir, I can explain my actions. No explanation is necessary. Your initiative saved the mission and potentially prevented attacks on 3 human colony worlds. But there are some people who want to speak with you about your methods." The door opened and General Thex entered the room. The massive Valthek commander had to duck slightly to fit through the human-sized doorway. Behind him came Commander Zix, her crystalline form glowing with internal light that seemed brighter than usual. "Lieutenant Kim," General Thex said, his voice carrying none of the dismissive tone from their first meeting. "I owe you an apology." Hana stood at attention. "Sir, no apology is necessary." "Yes, it is. I judged your capabilities based on physical appearance and conventional military thinking. I was wrong on both counts." Commander Zix approached with her musical voice carrying notes of curiosity. "Lieutenant Kim, our tactical computers have analyzed your infiltration routes and sabotage techniques. They calculate that the probability of success for your mission should have been less than 3%. I was not following probability calculations, Commander. I was adapting to circumstances as they developed." "That is precisely what makes your achievement so remarkable," General Thex said. "Valthek military doctrine is based on proven strategies and overwhelming force. We do not adapt well when our planned approaches fail. The same is true for Nexeri computational methods," Commander Zix added. "We calculate optimal solutions based on available data, but we have difficulty improvising when conditions change unexpectedly." Colonel Park gestured toward the display screen, which was showing footage of Hana using maintenance robots to spread computer viruses throughout enemy systems. "The alien commands want to understand how you knew these techniques would work." "I did not know they would work, sir. I tried approaches that seemed logical given the available resources and adjusted when initial attempts failed." General Thex leaned forward with obvious interest. "You mean you were experimenting during combat operations?" "Yes, sir. The enemy had prepared defenses against conventional military tactics, so conventional tactics were unlikely to succeed. Alternative approaches required testing different methods until something proved effective. But that approach carries enormous risk of failure." "Yes, sir. But certain failure seemed worse than probable failure." Commander Zix's internal glow flickered in patterns that suggested deep thought. "Fascinating. Human tactical thinking appears to incorporate calculated risk acceptance and real-time adaptation in ways our species do not typically employ." The display screen continued showing footage from Hana's mission, scenes of her moving through spaces that larger beings could not navigate, using tools in ways they were not designed for, and finding solutions that had not appeared in any tactical manual. "Lieutenant Kim," General Thex said, "this footage has been transmitted to Coalition Command and shared with military leaders from dozens of species. There is considerable interest in understanding how humans approach problem-solving in impossible situations. Sir, I am not sure my methods represent typical human approaches." "Perhaps not," Colonel Park said, "but they represent human potential that we have been consistently underestimating." Major Lee consulted his tablet. "Sir, we are receiving requests for copies of the combat footage from military academies across the galaxy. They want to use it as a case study in unconventional warfare. There are also requests for Lieutenant Kim to address tactical conferences and training programs," added the communications officer. Hana felt overwhelmed by the sudden attention. "Sir, I was just doing my job as I understood it." "That may be true," General Thex said, "but you did your job in ways that none of us had considered possible. You succeeded where our best warriors failed, using resources we had dismissed as inadequate." Commander Zix moved closer, her crystalline features reflecting the light from the display screen. "Lieutenant Kim, you have demonstrated capabilities that our tactical computers did not predict humans possessed. This has significant implications for future coalition operations. What kind of implications? We have been assigning human personnel to support roles based on assumptions about your physical limitations and tactical preferences. But your mission suggests we should reconsider how human capabilities complement those of other species. General Thex nodded in agreement. The Valthek military has always valued strength and direct confrontation. But your success demonstrates the value of flexibility and creative problem-solving. Sir, every species has different strengths. The mission succeeded because different approaches were needed for different challenges. Exactly, General Thex said. And we have been failing to utilize human strengths effectively because we did not understand what those strengths were. The display screen showed the final scenes from Hana's mission, her successful extraction through routes that only she could have navigated. When the footage ended, the room was quiet for several moments. Lieutenant Kim, Colonel Park said finally, your actions have saved lives and changed how the galaxy views human capabilities. The footage from your mission is being called the most important tactical demonstration in recent military history. Sir, I hope it helps other people understand that sometimes the best solution is not the most obvious one. General Thex laughed, a sound like distant thunder that somehow conveyed warmth instead of menace. Lieutenant, you have taught us that sometimes being underestimated is the greatest tactical advantage of all. 6 months later, recruitment offices for the Terran Defense Corps across the galaxy reported unprecedented applications from alien species wanting to learn human tactical methods. The footage of Lieutenant Hana Kim moving through impossible spaces and achieving impossible objectives had become legendary. But for Hana herself, standing in a briefing room where she was finally being asked for her tactical opinions instead of being dismissed as too small for real combat, the greatest victory was simpler. Sometimes all it took was one person willing to crawl through maintenance tunnels to prove that humans belonged among the stars.